In Magic and multiplayer EDH games, there's a lot of different misplays that you can do, but there's one very repetitive one that I often see in cEDH and even casual EDH. And in this educational video tutorial, I will help you see it, but also help you from doing it. In a normal 1v1 in Magic, threat assessment is actually quite simple. You have one opponent and you're going to put your entire focus at crushing that one opponent. For example, if that player is trying to resolve a really dangerous spell that is really high on the threat assessment scale, you should counterspell it or use a spot removal to get rid of that thing. The person who is casting a question, a really dangerous spell, and you, the person responding with an answer, a counterspell or spot removal, both of you are going down by one card. You're trading equally. But in multiplayer, you can't sit and do too many of those trades, because there are other opponents as well. For example, if you're trading 1-for-1 with one opponent, you aren't actually affecting the other two players. Now, I'm not saying that you should ignore your opponents. If someone is casting a fast oracle, you kind of have to deal with it. But there is a potential pathway that some people go where they are interacting so heavily with people that they are sacrificing their own chance of winning the game. I really think sacrifice is the right terminology here. In multiplayer games, regardless of what multiplayer game that you're playing, what you always want to happen is that one opponent are spending resources dealing with another one of your opponents. Because that red elemental blast could have been used to protect your own combo against counterspells from your opponents. And in multiplayer EDH games, you often feel that you're getting overwhelmed by dangerous threats that your opponents are doing because you're going up against 3 opponents. So that's actually quite normal. You're going to feel over-threatened by your opponents. And this is the first lesson you need to learn. You can't become an arch enemy out of the blue and take over the game and interact with everything your opponents are going to do, because you're going to run out of resources in mana and the cards in your hand trying to go down that pathway. Let's say someone is casting a back to basic and you feel threatened. This is something you have to deal with, or else you're going to lose, in your opinion. So you use your red elemental blast, but then you've spent resources and you no longer have that red elemental blast, then someone is casting a fast oracle and you actually lose the game. This example can be easily converted into casual EDH as well. What I'm actually talking about is resource management and threat assessment. If one opponent is doing something you consider really dangerous, you decide to deal with that Elishanon. Then someone is casting their commander cEDH. You don't like that, so you deal with that cEDH as well. Then someone is casting Muldrotha, the Grey Tide, and you're deciding to deal with that person as well. In this situation, you've dealt with all of your 3 opponents. Great! You've lost 3 cards doing so, but all of your other opponents have only lost 1 card in this trade. And that means you're going to drain your resources trying to deal with everything you see that your opponents are trying to do. It feels so good doing this. It feels like you're having an impact, and you kind of have. You're having a great impact. You're preventing your opponents from winning the game, but you are sacrificing your own chance of winning the game because you're not currently developing your board state in this interactive pathway that you're going down into. And it's a slippery slope because it's hard to actually see this. You have to see that you're sacrificing and starting to lose your potential winning, because instead of kinda destroying that cEDH, you could have put in a ramp spell into play. You could have drawn some cards. You could have improved your board state in some form of way that is increasing your chance of winning. But instead, you decided to spend your resources destroying cEDH. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have any interaction inside your deck. You need interaction to make sure that you don't lose the game to your opponents when they are trying to win with their win con. And you need interaction as well when you want to protect your own win con when you're trying to win. But what I am saying is that you shouldn't overkill your opponents. Let's make an example you might be on the receiving end of. Let's say you have a really good deck in general. Let's say you're playing Kenrith the Returned King, and you've been able to demonstrate a few wins to your opponents, player B, and let's say also player C. We don't really need a player D for this example. Now let's say that your game plan is to reanimate Razaketh, but player C have done his homework. Let's say there is a Cursed Totem or a Kunorus in play that is preventing the Kenrith player from actually winning. Now you have successfully dealt with the Kenrith player. He is no longer able to win at the current state. He could actually get there eventually, so he cast a Sylvan Library, but player C got a Nature's Claim in his hand and decides to use it to destroy the Sylvan Library. But player A got more stuff to get back into the game. He casts Occam Adversary, and player C responds with Lightning Bolt on the Elf Warrior. But now I gotta ask, are we overkilling player A? I mean, we already dealt with the player A with the Cursed Totem or the Kunorus, and destroying the Sylvan Library were probably the right decision. But now killing the Occam as well, I mean, what about player B? It is actually really easy for one player to make sure that another player don't win the game by just spending all their 100% focus at interacting with everything that player is doing. But in doing so, they throw away their chance of actually winning themselves. And if this is a problem you have with one of your regular opponents, share the video. So here comes lesson number 2 for player C. If you're losing, it doesn't matter who is winning between player A and player B. Losing is losing and winning is winning, and you don't care which one of your opponents who are winning. But this is really difficult, I know that, and you can have great lengths of debate whether or not how much you should interact with player A. For example, player B might be in a terrible position, and this is more of a 1v1 between player A and player C, and in that case, you probably should over-interact with player A. So here comes lesson number 3, and this is a lesson you could actually practice on and get better with over time, and you probably have to. Acquire experience and knowledge about commanders and decks your opponents are playing by playing against them until you figure out how much you need to interact with them until you are affecting their game plan without overkilling them. Let me make an example with the Gitrog monster. In my opinion, the best way of making sure the Gitrog monster's game plan won't function is by interacting with the commander as much as you can. Don't let the Gitrog monster have access to the commander. Kill it, counterspell it all the time. But ignore everything else the deck is doing. It is, in my opinion, overkill by destroying a Sylvan Library for the Gitrog monster as long as you're able to destroy the commander instead. But I've also found with experience that Rest in Peace is actually better at making sure the Gitrog monster deck won't function. So if there is a Rest in Peace in play, you can pretty much ignore the commander Gitrog and let that stay in play. And instead protect the Rest in Peace, or when the Rest in Peace is destroyed, start killing the Gitrog monster. And I have learned this by playing a lot against the Gitrog monster, but also been playing with the Froggy boss. So all of you player A's out there, don't be too angry at player C. They are learning and they are getting better over time, playing more and more against you. So here comes another fundamental rule or law, you could say, about free-for-all multiplayer games. Whenever one of your opponents are asking a question, or you could also say executing a threat, the amount of resources you have to spend answering that threat or surviving that threat, you could also say, is showcasing how much you're affected by that threat. Because in multiplayer games, you have several opponents who are all affected by that threat or that question. And that means that there's probably gonna be one of your opponents who are more affected by it than you. And that opponent might be forced to deal with it. So let's bring back the example with the Gitrog monster and Rest in Peace. In this game, the Gitrog monster is going to 100% spend all of its resources getting rid of this answer. Let's say you're playing some form of reanimator deck, the Kenrith, where you want to bring Rasaketh into play from your graveyard. This is currently impossible, so you can't put your big demon into your grave. But remember that the Gitrog monster might solve this problem for you. So even though you might be capable of destroying the Rest in Peace, maybe you shouldn't. So here comes the last lesson, and this is a really difficult lesson to learn. It's a lesson about figuring out who is most likely going to interact with this thing. And ask yourself, do you actually have to interact with it because maybe one of your other opponents will? If you realize that none of your opponents are going to interact with it, you might have to interact with it. But with this skill, by practicing figuring out what decks might actually be more likely to interact with other questions some of your other opponents are doing, you might be able to save a lot of your interaction and resources because you've learned that your other opponents are going to deal with them for you. If you have any questions to anything I've been talking about in this video, feel free to leave a comment below. Also, if you're looking for people that you want to talk Magic with, brew decks with, or talk about getting better at playing Magic with, feel free to join my Discord server. That's where I mostly personally hang out. You can find the link in the description below of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and you wanna support me, feel free to share my videos or even checking out my Patreon page. Also, purchasing cards from the TCG Players website using the affiliate link in the description below of the video will also help the channel grow. So a big thank you to all of you.